Delighted to welcome one of my first guests of the new year. In fact, one of the last guests on my last show of 2020, and that's Brendan O'Neill, editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
Hello. An awful lot's changed since the last time we spoke. Tier 4 lockdowns, possibility of schools not going back at all for many parts of the country, maybe even all of the country. Talk of, as I say, a second full lockdown and far more restrictions on our lives. But meanwhile, we are in the same situation where we've got ongoing woke battles and culture wars as well. Has anything really changed in that area?
It looks like it might actually be getting worse. I mean, as we were saying, we've discussed this before. In 2020, some of us suspected that because there was a serious health crisis and an economic crisis and the destruction of civil liberty on a scale none of us has witnessed before, we thought that that might push the woke nonsense to one side. People might come to their senses, pull together, have serious political debates. But in fact, what happened in 2020 is that wokeness got worse. It went more and more insane. We saw comedy shows being shoved down the memory hole, statues being torn down, museums and libraries expressing self-hatred about their founders, all this kind of crazy stuff. And I think in 2021, that is going to intensify. And the reason it's going to intensify is because not enough people, unfortunately, especially in government, are standing up to this and saying, we don't want this woke nonsense. We want a bit more reason.
Absolutely. And again, the vast majority of people don't have any time for this nonsense. But I mean, even just in the last weekend, looking at the papers, getting back from Holes, looking at the papers, two stories hit me. Well, the first one, actually, the third one was the BBC poll. Fewer and fewer people trusting the BBC, largely as a result of a lot of their coverage of a lot of these issues being completely out of touch with their viewership. But also people calling for a ban on the film Grease. I mean, the hit musical. I mean, one of the highest grossing films of the 1970s. For people of my era, I mean, this was the first album I ever had. I mean, this was so. I mean, I could recite that film word for word even to this day. Basically, it's being accused of racism, sexism, homophobia, and slut shaming even. And then we've also got Lenny Henry, a man who's had a huge career on television for almost my entire life, complaining about how TV is still too white in this country, particularly because we have particularly those sort of historical dramas which bizarrely in a very, very, very white country feature white characters and white actors. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. And whenever anyone parodies any of this stuff, you think, well, that'll be the next thing they come up with. And then they actually do it.
Then they actually do it. And Grease is such a good example. I mean, the hysteria about Grease when it was shown on TV and all these kind of snowflakes had a meltdown on social media, it really summed up what these people are like. And the tragedy is they can no longer enjoy culture. I mean, if you don't enjoy Grease, a movie with hilarious lines, attractive actors, brilliant songs, I mean, if you don't enjoy that kind of bubblegum throwaway pop, then I don't know what you can enjoy. But what actually happens with these people is they sit down and watch things and they make notes. They count the number of black characters. They talk about what the women are saying and what the men are saying. Everything is political to these people. And that is the real problem, I think, with some of the woke campaigners. And in relation to Lenny Henry's comments, I mean, they're just untrue, as it happens. There was a survey last year which found that actually on screen, on TV screens, black people are disproportionately represented. They have more representation than they do in the population at large. Now, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I don't care what color people are on TV. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But the way in which we are constantly encouraged to think that TV and the BBC and all these other institutions are racist, are institutionally racist, are purposefully denying ethnic minority people airtime, it is categorically untrue. And I think that's one of the things people are sick of. They're sick of this diversity agenda, not because they are opposed to equality, but because they know it's just certain people trying to make their way in the world, and they're using the race issue very often to try and do that.
Yeah, I wish you find actually it's nearly always privately educated, privileged young people who are complaining that they are somehow being discriminated against when they've basically got their career out of well, let's face it, race baiting, which is what a lot of this is. But I mean, Lenny Henry has been a much loved, incredibly popular, very high profile figure on our TV screens for decades now. To complain that a TV drama which is about white people doesn't have enough white people. It's like me complaining that the Cosby Show is about a black family. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And I completely understand the significance of having people who look like you on the telly. I like the fact that when we have debate programs on the news now, that it is just as normal for there to be a woman making, giving an argument, a comment on it, or being a scientific expert or whatever, than it is to be a man. It used to be the case, genuinely, when I first started doing telly, I'd be the only woman on any panel every single time I went on television. Now, that is not the norm. That has changed. And that's simply about them actually bothering to call some women commentators. But the idea that there is this deliberate policy somehow of not casting black actors or not having black people on the television or any other ethnic minority, I mean, it's not only false, it is actually darned offensive. It's accusing an awful lot of people of being racist, basically.
It is offensive, and it shows how utterly robbed of meaning the word racist has become, because that word is now used all the time to describe things that are clearly not racist. I mean, there are numerous problems with the BBC, and that's why it's people's faith in it is plummeting, as the recent opinion poll found out. There are numerous problems, but it is not a racist institution. It is not anti-black. It is not anti-Asian. That is just a lie, and I don't think there's any serious institution in this country which is racist. So that word is bandied around far too much. And the thing is, I'm like you, I'm entirely in favour of all sorts of people and all sorts of voices being on TV and on radio. I think that's fantastic. But very often what we have here are upper middle class people who use the issue of identity to try and advance their own careers. So one good example was the women at the BBC who were demanding equal pay to men, even though the men were far better known and had far more viewers in some instances. And some of these women presented these campaigns as being on a par with the suffragettes. I'm sorry, but women fighting tooth and nail for the right to vote is very different from incredibly privileged women fighting for the right to earn £700,000 a year. So they are so out of touch, and they use the language of equality actually to protect their own privilege. And that's what annoys ordinary people.
I think you nailed it there. Brendan O'Neill, as always, editor of Spiked Online. Thank you very much indeed.